One of the preeminent college football powers comes to Madison for a rare opportunity for Wisconsin this weekend, and the man who will be calling it all here on Fox 6 and across the nation, Joel Klatt, joins us now. Joel, great to have you on with this before number 4 Alabama comes to Madison to face the Badgers. Tell us about the opportunity here for Wisconsin. This is only the third matchup between these programs in history, and for Luke Fickell, early in his career at Wisconsin, a chance for a rare showcase victory.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting word like showcase victory, because I think that every coach, in particular a coach that's going to come in and change a lot of things and try to build his own culture, which Luke Fickell is trying to do, they need these trademark showcase type wins. And it does a lot of things in a lot of different ways. You know, obviously it helps in recruiting, but more so it helps galvanize the locker room. And then everybody within your organization just buys in even a little bit more. And it proves to everyone that these little things that you've been asking them to do and requiring them to do are going to pay off. That's the big point of this one. And this one, I think, could be monumental if Wisconsin were to beat Alabama. Listen, over the last 15 years, and I understand Nick Saban is not there, but the benchmark in college football is Alabama. Think of even the team that has won 2 national championships in the last 3 years. I believe, Carl, they're like 46-2 in Georgia's last 48 games, something along those lines. Guess the 2 losses, Alabama and Nick Saban. So beating this team would signal to everybody, not only in the region, not only in the Big Ten, but around the country, that this is working with Luke Fickell and that Wisconsin's going to be back at the top of college football and playing really important games.
From what you've seen through one full season and now a couple weeks in, a little bit up and down for the Badgers so far, though 2-0, how far along is Fickell in implementing what was so successful at Cincinnati here in Madison?
You know, last year was so difficult because they struggled with their health so much, you know, in particular at running back, which led to them throwing the ball more than they wanted to throw the ball. Even though it was an air raid offense under Phil Longo, the offensive coordinator, I still think that Luke Fickell, if you really look at him and his background, he's going to want to run the football probably the majority of the time, over 50%. Last year, it was under 50% that they run the football. That's the first time, by the way, Wisconsin's been under 50% running the football since the 40s. So that just shows you the change in kind of the culture and narrative surrounding that program. You know, for me, that's really where the key of the game is looking at the offensive line, which they like a lot, looking at the running back room, which is much more healthy than it was a year ago. Can they control the game on the ground? South Florida did a really good job. Now, granted, they were running their quarterback to do it, but they did a nice job of kind of controlling the tempo of the game, staying on the field, sustaining drives, moving the chains, and it never allowed Alabama's offense to get a rhythm. That's the same type of blueprint that I think Wisconsin's going to need on Saturday.
Luke Fickell is trying to make his imprint on the Badgers. Certainly so goes for the coach on the other sideline, Kalen DeBoer. You mentioned Nick Saban, such a long and successful career, one of the greatest coaches in college football history. How far along is Alabama under DeBoer, and how different, how similar is this team to the one that we've watched just rampage through college football over the last decade and a half?
Well, they're still very talented, Carl. I mean, like, they're littered with 4- and 5-star players. So, you know, the level of athlete and football player that's coming to Madison is impressive. Now, it is different. You know, Nick Saban, he was the greatest football coach in college that we've ever seen for a reason. He was a hard driver and held the standard. You know, there's an old adage, you're either the thermostat or you're the thermometer. And Nick Saban is unequivocally the thermostat. And when you take the thermostat out of the program, it leaves a void. So it's like, okay, well, who's going to set the standard now? Is it the players? Is it the coaching staff? There's questions about that. And they are navigating that on an ongoing basis. So to say that they have arrived or they know who they are, I would think is a misnomer. This is a team that's going to face their first real big moment without Nick Saban on Saturday. And to me, that shouldn't be overlooked. And we don't know how they're going to react because of that. I trust that Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. That's why he's the coach at the University of Alabama. He's won well over 100 games in his career as a head coach. He's lost only 12. He's won a national championship at Sioux Falls. He went to a national championship game last year with Washington. he can coach, there's no doubt, but we don't know what the chemistry and the culture is going to do and how it's going to react when it faces adversity for the first time, because we haven't seen that.
Two questions about the game day atmosphere that your viewers and we will enjoy here on Saturday with such a big game. What are your impressions of Jump Around? And as a broadcaster, do you take a moment there between quarters to really soak it in, something so special to UW?
Yeah. There's no doubt. I mean, it's as good of an environment as any in college football. I think that Camp Randall is one of those special places. I will always remember, and it wasn't just because it was a great college football environment, but Carl, we came into town in 2021 for the opener against Penn State. And it was the first time that we had fans back in the stadium. And I'll always remember that, like that, say what you will about COVID, that day in Madison, in Camp Randall, was the day COVID was done, because we came back and we covered Jump Around live during the commercial break. I've never seen so much joy, the carefree nature. Now, Wisconsin ended up losing the game, unfortunately for the Badger fans, because Penn State did a great job defensively late in that game. But that moment of Jump Around, that day, with what had gone on in our world and our country over the course of the previous 15 months, I'll always remember that, and that was one of the most special moments of my life, to be quite honest with you. So it's going to be hard to recreate that moment, there's no doubt, but I'm praying for a tight game at that juncture, because if that game is tight, man, Jump Around's going to be off the hook. And we'll cover it live again, so fans be ready for it.
That's well said. Much of the season for Wisconsin, and certainly he'll be honored on Saturday, is focused on Ron Dayne, 25 years since he won the Heisman Trophy. I'd be curious if you can just put into context, because you played with a lot of guys like this. The game has changed so much. I guess we kind of see it with Derrick Henry in the pros now, but will we see a bowling ball player like that, just kind of torching through defenses and running them over like Ron Dayne did for so many years at Madison?
I don't know. I like, it's changed so much because no one's looking for that style anymore. It's not that couldn't be successful, because I think a hard downhill runner can still be successful. But Carl, so much of football is now played on the perimeter. And it's not just that you want a guy that's smaller. It's just that he's got to be versatile. The best running backs now have to be able to catch the ball out of the backfield. Not that Ron couldn't do that, but it certainly wasn't his forte. It wasn't for any of those backs in the 90s. Remember, we had all these guys. Remember Kajana Carter and Rashawn Salam at Colorado and Ricky Williams at Texas. It was kind of the running back era, if you will. But then all of a sudden, LaDainian Tomlinson and Marshall Faulk come into the realm. And we start seeing these guys that catch it so well out of the backfield and the threat that they are to the defense, and they really changed football. And now, with air raid systems, the ability to throw the football, with 7-on-7 culture in the high school level, what we see now is that it's more of a hybrid player at running back than it ever was. So to answer your specific question about Ron Dayne, no, we're never going to see another Ron Dayne, which is why we should celebrate him and honor him on Saturday.
Does feel like a bit of a time capsule there. All right, I'll ask you to look to the future, the near future here on Saturday. We know the Badgers are not favored. They're about a 16.5-point underdog going in. So give us the template. How does this play out for a Wisconsin win on Saturday?
They have to control the line of scrimmage. They've got to do a good job of keeping their defense off the field. Because if the defense is exposed to Jalen Milroe and some of those athletes for an extended period of time, then I don't like the matchup for them. And we saw that play out Michigan and Texas last week. Michigan couldn't get off the field. Their defense ended up wearing down. Their offense couldn't sustain drives. Their defense ended up wearing down. And similarly, this Wisconsin team is going to have to sustain drives with their offensive line and their running game. Ches Malusi is going to have to play a big part in what goes on Saturday. And then the other part of that is, I think that they're going to need to get some turnovers. Now, Hallman has done a great job, 7 interceptions last year. I think this defense not only has to play their best, they have to get some turnovers, create the short field for their offense, and kind of put, I would say, Alabama in a precarious situation. And I'll just go back to this. You desperately want them to face adversity on their own for the first time without Nick Saban. That's just that should be the entire goal for Wisconsin, is let's create a game that is uncomfortable for Alabama because it will be the first time that they're going through that without Saban.
A true road game for the Crimson Tide as the SEC travels north to Big Ten country, and the man who will be on the call for it all, Joel Klatt. Thank you so much for all the time here in the preview.
You bet, Carl. Have a good one.